If you found your way here, chosen one, pause for a breath and let the noise settle for a second, because what I'm about to say is not about escape, and it's not about fantasy. It's about recognition. The 5D everyone keeps whispering about is not a secret address in the universe, not a door you travel through with a suitcase of crystals and a perfect morning routine. It's a state of consciousness, a way of perceiving reality that moves beyond fear, beyond the heavy gravity of old patterns, beyond the illusion that you are only what has happened to you. And if your life has felt like it's cracking at the edges lately, if things are shifting, relationships thinning, plans dissolving, emotions rising like tides you can't predict, I want you to hear this clearly. Sometimes what feels like collapse is actually alignment. Sometimes the old scaffolding has to come down because you are no longer meant to live inside a structure that was built for a smaller version of you. This is not a warning meant to scare you. It's a message meant to steady you. Because the question isn't whether change is coming. The question is whether you will meet it consciously. And before we go deeper, do this with me. If you feel even a spark of truth in these words, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, not out of habit, but as a signal to yourself that you're committing to growth, clarity, and a higher way of seeing. Now tell me in the comments, what sign has been the loudest in your life lately? The one you can't ignore anymore? Because chosen one, the real question is simple and sharp. Are you noticing the signs? And what will you decide? When we talk about the fifth dimension, let's first sweep away the biggest misunderstanding, the one that makes people either roll their eyes or chase it like a trend. 5D is not a set of coordinates. It's not a hidden planet, a sci-fi hallway, or a magical level you unlock by saying the right words. It's not a physical place you arrive at with your body. It's a shift in consciousness, meaning it changes how you perceive life, how you interpret meaning, how you respond to challenges, and how you recognize what's real beyond appearances. In the old way of living, the world is mostly interpreted through matter and linear time. What happened yesterday determines what happens tomorrow. People do things and you react. Circumstances appear and you scramble, and your inner world becomes a hostage to whatever your outer world decides to do. But 5D perception starts to loosen that grip. It's not that you deny the physical world. You still pay bills, you still take care of responsibilities, you still feel emotions, but you begin to experience something else underneath it all. A deeper awareness that you are not trapped inside the events of your life. You are participating in them, shaping them, and learning through them. In 5D, you stop living as if you are merely a character being pushed around by the plot. You remember you are also a conscious co-author, and the story changes when the author wakes up. This is why the fifth dimension is often described as expanded consciousness. Expansion means you're no longer limited to one narrow lens, one interpretation, one emotional script that repeats forever. You begin to sense layers. You see patterns. You notice timing. You recognize that what looks like a setback might actually be redirection. What looks like rejection might be protection. What looks like delay might be preparation. And this isn't naive positivity. It's a deeper intelligence, the kind that forms when you've suffered enough to stop worshipping outcomes and start listening for meaning. In 3D thinking, you often ask, why is this happening to me? In 5D awareness, you start asking, what is this shaping in me? That question alone changes the temperature of your entire life. It turns chaos into curriculum. It turns pain into data. It turns fear into a signal, not a sentence. And here's where the idea of interconnectedness becomes more than a pretty word. In 3D, separation is the default. You versus them, your problems versus their luck, your past versus your future, your needs versus the world's limitations. But in 5D perception, you begin to experience reality as a web. Not a web that traps you, but a web that connects you. You start to notice how a thought affects your mood, how your mood affects your choices, how your choices affect your relationships, how your relationships affect your environment, and how your environment echoes back into your nervous system. You notice feedback loops. You notice that certain conversations drain you for days, while certain places restore you within minutes. You notice that your body reacts to dishonesty before your mind can explain it. You notice that your intuition has been knocking quietly, and now it's pounding because you've been ready to hear it. This is the web, and once you see the web, you cannot unsee it. You stop living like life is random. You start living like life is responsive. This is also why people in awakening seasons often feel like their life is falling apart. It's because the structures built on unconsciousness cannot hold you when you become conscious. Old friendships that were glued together by trauma bonding start to crumble. Jobs that required you to shrink begin to feel unbearable. Habits that numbed you begin to taste bitter. The fifth dimension doesn't arrive like fireworks. It often arrives like honesty. It arrives like discomfort that refuses to be ignored. It arrives like a quiet inner voice saying, "This is not who you are anymore." And chosen one, that voice is not your enemy. That voice is your upgrade. Now, as your awareness expands, you naturally begin to notice something else: vibration. Not as a trendy term, but as a real experience. Vibration is the felt quality of your inner state. It's the emotional frequency you carry, the meaning you assign to events, the energy behind your words, the intention behind your decisions. You already know this from ordinary life, even if you've never called it that. You've walked into a room and felt tension without anyone speaking. You've met someone and felt safe instantly, or unsettled instantly, without evidence you could explain. You've listened to music that lifted you, and you've consumed content that left you anxious for hours. That's vibration. It's the invisible atmosphere of consciousness, and it shapes what you notice, what you tolerate, and what you attract into your experience. This is where thoughts and emotions stop being private. In 3D living, people treat thoughts like harmless background noise and emotions like inconvenient weather. In 5D awareness, you realize thoughts are signals and emotions are messengers. Your mind is not just thinking, it's broadcasting. Your heart is not just feeling, it's informing. And your nervous system is not just reacting, it's translating your inner world into physical sensation. When you carry resentment, your body tightens. When you carry fear, your breathing changes. When you carry gratitude, your perception opens. This isn't spiritual fluff, it's human design. You are wired to become what you repeatedly rehearse inside. Now hear this carefully, because this is where the path becomes real. With higher awareness comes higher responsibility. Not guilt, not pressure. Responsibility in the truest sense means responsibility, your ability to respond rather than react. When you begin to understand that your inner state influences your choices influence your outcomes, and your outcomes reinforce your beliefs, you stop living on autopilot. You begin to choose. And choosing is powerful, but it's also confronting. Because you can't blame everything on the outside anymore. You can't keep saying, "That's just how I am," when you realize you've been practicing a version of yourself that you no longer want to be. You can't keep feeding your mind poison and expect your spirit to feel clear. You can't keep entertaining the same fear stories and then wonder why life feels heavy. In 5D alignment, choosing thoughts becomes choosing outcomes, not in a simplistic, think happy and everything is perfect way, but in a grounded way. Because your dominant thoughts create your dominant focus, your dominant focus shapes your dominant behavior, and your dominant behavior builds your dominant life. If your focus is always scanning for danger, you will interpret neutral events as threats. If your focus is always scanning for lack, you will miss opportunities that don't look like miracles at first. If your focus is always scanning for betrayal, you will sabotage good connections before they have a chance to grow. This is not punishment, it's pattern. And once you see the pattern, you gain power over it. That's why healing becomes non-negotiable in this season. Healing is not just about feeling better, it's about becoming coherent. It's about aligning what you say you want with what you repeatedly do. It's about closing the gap between your prayers and your habits. It's about letting your life stop being split into compartments: spiritual on Sunday, anxious on Monday, numb on Tuesday, pretending on Wednesday. In 5D awareness, you crave integrity, not as a moral performance, but as inner peace. Because every time you betray yourself, your energy fractures. Every time you choose truth, your energy consolidates, and consolidation feels like power. Quiet power, the kind that doesn't need to shout. And as you begin to live with this responsibility, something beautiful happens. Transformation stops being an event and becomes a lifestyle. You stop waiting for the perfect moment to change. You change in moments. You change in small choices. You change in what you consume, what you tolerate, what you repeat, what you believe. You begin to notice how quickly your reality responds when your inner world stabilizes. Not because the universe is a vending machine, but because your perception becomes clear enough to see doors you used to overlook, and your courage becomes strong enough to walk through them. This is also where the collective awakening comes in, because the fifth dimension is not only personal. When enough individuals shift from fear-based living to love-based living, from reactivity to discernment, from ego survival to soul stewardship, the entire atmosphere of human life begins to change. You see it in the way people are no longer satisfied with shallow relationships. You see it in the way old systems feel shaky. You see it in the way truth keeps rising, even when it's uncomfortable. You see it in the way many are being called back to nature, to simplicity, to prayer, to meaning, to purpose. And you, chosen one, are not watching this from the sidelines. You are part of it. Your healing doesn't just free you, it lightens the space around you. Your courage doesn't just change your future, it gives permission to others to stop lying to themselves. So when you feel the pressure of this season, don't interpret it as doom. Interpret it as birth. Pressure is often what forms diamonds, but it also forms decisions. And this is the decision point. Will you keep living as if your inner world doesn't matter? As if your thoughts are harmless and your emotions are inconveniences? As if your choices are small? Or will you step into responsibility, the quiet authority of a conscious life, where you choose your focus, you choose your meaning, you choose your next faithful step? Because 5D is not a badge, it's a practice. It's not something you claim, it's something you embody. And the moment you begin to embody it, you realize the fifth dimension has been waiting for you the whole time, not somewhere out there in the stars, but right here, inside the way you see, the way you respond, and the way you decide to become. As you begin to understand that 5D is not a destination, but a way of perceiving, the next thing you start noticing is that the world itself feels like it's moving under your feet. Not in a dramatic movie scene way, but in the quiet, relentless way that seasons change. This is where people use the word transition, and I want you to hear it with clarity, chosen one, because the transition is not a countdown on a cosmic clock, not a single date where the skies split and everyone suddenly becomes enlightened. It's gradual, it's collective, it's layered. It's happening like dawn happens, first as a shift in the atmosphere, then as colour on the horizon, then as light you can't deny. You're living through a collective shift in consciousness, where what used to be normal is starting to feel unnatural, and what used to be tolerated is starting to feel intolerable. Old systems are shaking, not because everything is doomed, but because everything built on unconsciousness cannot remain stable in a world that is waking up. And that's why it feels personal, because you are not separate from the collective field. When the atmosphere changes, your lungs notice. When the frequency changes, your nervous system notices. When the culture is recalibrating, your private life becomes the first place where the recalibration shows up. This is also why some people seem to arrive faster. Not because they are superior, and not because they've earned a spiritual medal, but because readiness is a real thing. Some hearts are open enough to receive change without fighting it. Some minds are flexible enough to question old beliefs instead of defending them to the death. Some souls are tired enough of suffering that they finally stop clinging to the very patterns that create suffering. Readiness looks like humility. It looks like willingness. It looks like the ability to say, maybe the way I've been doing life isn't the only way. And openness is not weak. Openness is powerful, because it allows new information to enter. It allows healing to enter. It allows divine guidance to enter. Awareness is what happens when you stop sleeping through your own life, when you stop numbing, when you stop pretending, when you stop rushing, when you start noticing your triggers, your patterns, your reactions, your words, your energy. That's why it feels like certain people are ahead, They're not ahead in status, they're ahead in awareness, and awareness changes everything. And this is where the phrase beings of light gets misunderstood. It doesn't mean you're floating above humanity, untouched by pain, never anxious, never tired, never confused. If anything, the chosen ones often feel more, not less. They are early adopters of consciousness. They are sensitive to the shift before the shift becomes obvious. They are the ones whose life gets uncomfortable first, because their spirit refuses to keep living in a frequency that their soul has already outgrown. The chosen ones are often called the bridge people, the ones who can still understand the old world because they lived in it, but who can no longer belong to it because they've tasted something truer. And your role is not to preach at people. Your role is to embody something, to become proof, to be a living demonstration that integrity can exist, that peace can exist, that love can exist even in a chaotic world. Your life becomes a lighthouse not because you force it, but because you steady your inner world so deeply that others begin to feel safe around you again. Now, as the transition becomes more real, you'll notice the most immediate place it shows up is not in your bank account or your social media feed. It shows up in your body. Because your body is not just meat and bones, chosen one. Your body is a receiver. It's an instrument. It reads the environment. It reads your beliefs. It reads your stress. It reads your truth. And it responds. This is why the so-called ascension symptoms feel so confusing. You might experience fatigue that sleep doesn't fix, insomnia where your mind feels awake at the wrong hours, mood swings that seem to come from nowhere, random aches and pains, digestion acting strange, appetite shifting, sensitivity to temperatures, feeling hot and cold like a thermostat that can't decide. And the first temptation is to assume something is wrong with you, to panic, to label yourself broken. But what if your system is recalibrating? What if your nervous system is learning a new baseline? What if your body is releasing old, stored stress, old emotions, old survival responses that have been living in the muscles and the gut and the breath? There's a reason anxiety can feel like electricity. It can come in waves, like sudden surges, like your heart is sprinting while your life is standing still. It can feel like a buzzing under the skin, like restlessness you can't name, like you're anticipating something but you can't say what. This is often what happens when the nervous system has been living in fight or flight for too long and is finally being asked to come back into regulation. Your body has learned to be hypervigilant, scanning for threat, expecting disappointment, preparing for loss. And when you begin to awaken, your spirit starts pulling you toward peace. But your body hasn't learned peace yet, so it resists, it trembles, it signals, it tries to keep you safe the only way it knows how, by staying tense. That's why you can't shame yourself for symptoms. You can't bully your body into spirituality. You have to coach it gently into safety. So support yourself like someone you love. Hydrate like your cells are thirsty for clarity. Eat lighter if your body is asking for it, not as a rigid rule, but as a loving experiment. Rest, not only sleep, but rest as in reducing overstimulation, stepping away from constant noise, taking slow walks, breathing with intention. Grounding becomes a sacred habit, not a trend. Put your feet on the earth. Let your nervous system remember that the planet is stable, even when your thoughts are not. Put your hands over your heart and breathe until your body believes you again. Choose moments of stillness like you choose food, because stillness is nourishment in a world that has been addicted to speed. And as the body recalibrates, the external world often begins to rearrange itself too. This is where you start to witness what looks like collapse, but is actually the collapse of old 3D structures. The dissolving can be subtle or dramatic. A relationship you fought to keep suddenly ends. A friendship fades without a big argument, just a quiet drifting. A career path that once made sense suddenly feels like wearing shoes that don't fit. A group you used to belong to feels like you're speaking different languages now. And at first, it hurts, because your nervous system reads change as threat. But your soul reads it as alignment, because anything built on the old you cannot hold the new you. If you are evolving, your life must evolve with you. It has to. Otherwise, you live with constant friction, like trying to grow while being held in a box. This is where you have to remember that endings are not always punishments. Sometimes they're protection, sometimes they're mercy, sometimes they're the universe removing what you would not release out of fear. And yes, grief will come. Don't pretend it won't. The pain of letting go is real. Even if you know something is not good for you, part of you will still mourn it because it was familiar. Familiarity can feel like safety, even when it is poison. That's why grief is not weakness. Grief is the soul's way of honoring what was. But here's the reframe that will save you. Grief does not mean you're going backward. Grief means you're human while you evolve. You're allowed to miss what you outgrew. You're allowed to feel the ache of transition. And you're also allowed to feel the quiet joy that comes when you realize you're no longer forcing yourself to fit. Because once the old dissolves, space opens, and space is sacred. Space is where the new life pattern forms. Space is where clarity speaks. Space is where divine direction becomes audible. When you're constantly surrounded by noise, you can't hear your calling. When you're constantly attached to what is familiar, you can't receive what is meant for you. So if you're in a season where things are being stripped, don't automatically interpret it as loss. Ask yourself, what kind of life is being made possible now that the clutter is leaving? And as the space opens, you'll notice a detox happening, not just in your body, but in your entire reality. Detoxing toxins sounds like it's only about substances, but in this season, toxins often show up as people, places, patterns, and loops. Environments can be toxic when they keep you in stress. Relationships can be toxic even when they look normal on the surface, because they require you to abandon yourself. Patterns can be toxic when they repeat the same pain with different faces. And thought loops, chosen one, those are some of the loudest toxins of all. The same internal stories. I'm behind. I'm not enough. I'll be abandoned. Nothing works out for me. I have to earn love. I have to perform to be safe. These loops are not truth. They are programming. They are old survival scripts. And detox means you stop feeding them. This is why the ego begins to soften. And ego softening is not humiliation. It's freedom. When you're evolving into 5D awareness, praise starts to feel less addictive, and criticism starts to feel less lethal. You stop living for applause, and you stop collapsing from disapproval. Neutrality increases. You don't need everyone to understand you anymore. You don't need to win every argument. You don't need to explain yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. That's ego softening. It's not that you become cold, it's that you become anchored. You become harder to manipulate because your identity is no longer negotiated in other people's opinions, and boundaries become your love language. Boundaries are not cruelty, they are not superiority, they are self-respect made visible. A boundary says, I can love you without losing myself. A boundary says, I can forgive you, but I will not hand you access to harm me again. A boundary says, I am responsible for the energy I carry, and I'm not available for what destroys it. In 5D alignment, boundaries are holy because they protect your peace, and peace is not optional in your calling. Peace is your power source. Without it, you become reactive again. Without it, you become programmable again. Without it, you return to the old frequency. Now, as your life detoxes, something else starts expanding, almost like a new sense waking up inside you. Your intuition gets louder, and it's not always dramatic. Sometimes it's a quiet knowing. Sometimes it's a pause in your chest. Sometimes it's a heaviness when someone smiles at you and you can't explain why. Sometimes it's a sudden clarity about a decision you've been avoiding. You begin to sense deeper motives. You can feel what people are not saying. You can anticipate outcomes before they unfold, not because you're paranoid, but because you're finally present. Presence is a superpower in a world full of distraction. And then time begins to feel different. Days may feel fast and strange. You may feel like weeks blur. Or you may feel like certain moments stretch, like you're outside the usual rush. This is what happens when you start detaching from matrix-like patterns, meaning the unconscious rhythm of life that tells you to hurry, consume, compete, compare, and stay numb. When you stop living on autopilot, time stops owning you. You start owning your attention, and attention is the currency of consciousness. Where your attention goes, your life goes. This is why discernment becomes essential. Intuition is powerful, but discernment protects it. Discernment means you don't confuse fear with guidance. You don't confuse anxiety with prophecy. You don't confuse obsession with alignment. You learn the difference between an ego alarm and a soul nudge. The ego screams and rushes. The soul is steady and clear. The ego threatens. The soul invites. The ego says, "Do it now or else." The soul says, "Be still and choose truth." Discernment grows when you practice stillness, when you pray, when you journal, when you check your body's response to a choice, when you learn your own patterns. Discernment is how you follow inner guidance without being pulled by every emotional wave. And as intuition expands, the world begins to feel louder in certain ways and quieter in others. You may find yourself drawn to nature like a magnet. Forests, oceans, mountains, even a small park suddenly feels like medicine. That's not random. Nature is an energetic tuning fork. It carries coherence, it carries rhythm, it carries truth without performance. The ocean doesn't pretend. The trees don't rush. The mountains don't beg for approval. When you enter nature, your nervous system remembers a deeper order. It's like your cells exhale. It's like your mind stops arguing. It's like your spirit says, "Yes, this is real." This is also why your body may crave simpler food, lighter food, cleaner inputs. Not because you're trying to be perfect, but because your sensitivity increases. You start noticing how chemicals affect you, how synthetic ingredients make you feel foggy, how certain foods make you heavy, how sugar spikes your mood, how caffeine amplifies your anxiety, how overeating dulls your intuition. And again, this is not about control, it's about listening. Your body becomes a more honest compass. The more awake you become, the less you can tolerate what numbs you. And then, perhaps the most profound shift of all begins to unfold quietly. Unity consciousness. Separation starts dissolving. Not in a way that makes you naive, but in a way that makes you compassionate. You begin to feel how connected everything is, how energy moves, how kindness echoes, how cruelty creates ripples, how your inner peace affects the atmosphere in a room. You stop seeing life as a battlefield where you must constantly defend your worth. You start seeing life as a school where you are learning love, learning truth, learning alignment. You begin to recognize that the person who hurt you is not your definition, and the pain you endured is not your identity. You are bigger than the worst thing that happened to you. You are becoming a vessel of clarity, and clarity is powerful because it does not need to destroy others to be true. So if you are in this season and everything feels intense, remember what we've been building from the beginning. This is not just spiritual language, this is lived transformation. Earth's transition feels personal because your life is the place where collective change becomes real. Your body recalibrates because it has to hold a higher level of truth. Old structures collapse because you cannot build a new identity on old foundations. Detox happens because you cannot carry toxins into a new frequency. Intuition expands because guidance becomes necessary when the old map no longer works. And nature pulls you because it teaches your nervous system how to be coherent again. Chosen one, you are not losing your mind, you are waking it up. You are not being punished, you are being refined. And the signs you're noticing are not meant to scare you. They're meant to invite you into a decision. Will you keep living like you're trapped in the old world? Or will you step into the new way of seeing, responding, and becoming? The way you anchor 5D in real life is not by waiting for a perfect mood or a dramatic spiritual moment, but by practicing a daily protocol that makes your inner world stable enough to hold the upgrades you're receiving. Start with acceptance, not as resignation, but as spiritual maturity. Accept what's happening without guilt and without rage. Guilt keeps you chained to the past. and rage keeps you chained to the trigger. But acceptance places you in the only position where you can actually move, the present. When emotions rise, don't drown in self-pity and don't bully yourself for feeling. Instead, name what's real, breathe with it, and ask a better question than, why me? Ask, what is this shaping in me right now? That single shift keeps you from spiraling into victimhood and returns you to responsibility, your ability to respond consciously rather than react automatically. From acceptance, step into balance, because 5D is not constant intensity, it's coherence. Maintain joy the way you maintain health, not as performance, but as practice. Joy doesn't mean you deny pain, it means you refuse to let pain define your entire identity. Balance looks like returning to simple things. Sleep when you can, drink water like it's medicine, take walks, stretch, laugh, create, clean your space, keep promises to yourself, and practice unconditional love with a spine. Love is not access. Love is not tolerance of disrespect. Love does not require you to shrink, betray yourself, or stay in what harms you. In fact, one of the clearest signs you're aligning is that your boundaries become calm and non-negotiable. You can bless people from a distance. You can forgive without reopening the door to the same wound. Then become intentional about inputs, because what you consume becomes what you carry. Reduce fear-based media that keeps your nervous system addicted to danger. If you must stay informed, choose short windows, not endless doom scrolling. Replace the noise with nourishment, uplifting music that regulates your emotions, books that expand your mind, teachings that strengthen your spirit, and conversations that don't leave you depleted. Pray, meditate, or sit in stillness daily, even if it's 5 minutes, because stillness is where your soul recalibrates. And finally, make helping others part of your protocol, not to prove anything, but because service seals your frequency. When you give from a sincere place, your life stops orbiting your anxiety and starts orbiting purpose. Purpose stabilizes you. And now, let's close the loop with truth. What looks like planetary chaos is often the breakdown of exploitative consciousness and the birth of a new one. Systems built on fear, control, and manipulation cannot survive in a world where people are waking up to their worth. But here's the warning, chosen one. Don't fall into victim-creator mode, where you claim you have no power while unconsciously repeating the beliefs that keep suffering alive. Unhealed beliefs can manifest prolonged hardship because they shape what you tolerate, what you expect, and what you repeatedly choose. The empowering reality is this: you can choose conscious evolution. You can make a quantum leap, not by forcing life, but by aligning your inner world so deeply that your outer world has to respond. You can create new realities by becoming a new person in the present. So I'm leaving you with one direct question, and it's not meant to pressure you, it's meant to wake you up. If you're seeing these signs, what will you decide? Tell me in the comments which signs have been the loudest in your life lately, and if this message resonates, like the video, subscribe, and stay close. Because what's opening for you now is not random, it's alignment.